Unaware what they were hiding inside their hands, woman gets scared of the young men filming her. It's easy to say, when life gives you lemons, use them to make lemonade. However, it's equally difficult to be implied in real life. Sometimes life can be really stressful. The good times get over in the blink of an eye, while the bad times seem to be never-ending. When we have no one by our side during the challenging phase, it becomes more heart-wrenching. We all go through the rough times, and this is the story of one woman who is facing it all alone. This incident took place when a woman was already struggling and a bunch of guys interrupted her. Things like this don't happen to everyone, and that's why we've selected this story to be shared today. As a child, when her father was her hero and her mother was her inspiration, she dreamt of growing old with someone who will love her. She dreamt to build up a beautiful life, as magical as her parents did. A small home, a cuddling pet, lovely kids, and that's all she wanted. All that she wanted was never written for her in her book of life. The biggest challenge for many of us is overcoming our biggest fears. For her, living a lonely life was the nightmare that scared her the most. As she grew older, at one stage of her life, slowly it started to become clear that her nightmare was soon to come true when her husband was diagnosed with cancer. Some live for money, some for happiness, some for family, some for love, some for fame. It can be anything that keeps us going. For this woman, it was her family. Life doesn't end on the day we die, but on the day we lose our reason to live. We all have reasons to exist, purpose to fulfill. Although most of us stay very busy with our daily schedules that we never even think about such heavy things. But when alone, and there's nothing else left to do, and we cannot even fall asleep, that's when these thoughts may hit our mind right at the center. A woman in her 40s was having some really tough days. Her bills were adding up, she worked part-time, and that wasn't enough to pay them off. Even if she wanted to, her health wouldn't have allowed her to work full-time. On top of everything, her doctor's prescribed drugs were too costly and yet too important. She recently left her home to pay off her debts, kids' studies, and moved to a small one-room flat. The most suitable words to explain her situation are, "Even our own shadow leaves us in the darkness." So she was not well, and she was all alone. Yes, being all by yourself is a good thing, but when someone sees their loved ones walking away all of a sudden, it can break anyone's heart. Her kids were not with her, and her husband gave up on life after a long illness. And all she was left with now was the memories and the random calls she used to receive from her kids once in a while. The only source of happiness in her life was the fact that she was able to give her kids the education they deserved. Although her kids were least bothered about her, she had no one to go to, but an empty home waiting for her. Even after all this, she tried hard to forget about what happened and look at what lies ahead. But she didn't know that one day at the gas station will be changing everything for her. She even used to babysit for families living in the same building whenever they needed her help. Children never failed to make her feel better. She was great with kids and parents appreciated her presence. Also, she couldn't deny the fact that she was in desperate need of money to pay her bills. She was holding on to so much and managed to not shed a single tear. But for how long could she manage to hold back the pain? Remember the days when so much was going on that you cried for no reason in particular, and for everything specifically? For her also, it was just a matter of time that when her patience level will be crossed and she'll break out. She knew she needed counseling, but she didn't have that kind of money for the counselor. She felt like with every other day she was losing control over her life. Still, days kept on passing and life kept on moving without any purpose until one fateful day. She was sleepy as, since she sold her house, she was suffering from severe insomnia. Her nights were usually sleepless and full of old days memories when her family was together and happy. She hardly ever fell asleep in that small apartment. Yes, Mondays can never go right for anyone, but it felt like everything was targeting the lady who was on the verge of falling into the deep pit of depression. She was running late for her work. She could not find her car keys anywhere. Well, this much wasn't enough, as this Monday morning will be bringing her into a more problematic and awkward situation. As she was all by herself, it became part of her routine to forget something or the other. Sometimes she forgot to take her specs. Other times, she left her lunch behind. The worst days were when she forgot her wallet. She knew that she has become a bit clumsy, but she couldn't help it. There was no way out of this completely different shape that her life has taken within a year. After forgetting things every day, she started keeping reminders on the fridge door. Wallet, check. Car keys, check. House keys, check. Lunch, check. Medicines, check. Cell phone, check. The list was complete and there was nothing left behind, but she still felt like something was missing. And all the necessary things were already with her. She didn't even care about thinking too much about what it was that she was forgetting. Little did she know, she'll be facing one big-time embarrassment because of this. When in her car, she noticed that there was not enough gas left in her car. Therefore, the first thing she has to do was to get it refilled. She patiently waited in the queue for her number, rethinking about everything and worrying about how it will all be managed. This is how much of her time used to pass. No entertainment, no friends, no outings, just thoughts, just worries. She was always a bit lost like that since she started living alone. She was thinking about how it has not always been like this. As a young girl, she was always attentive and active. Even as a mother, she was always aware of her responsibilities towards her kids. She loved her husband the most. Being a woman who always thought about others throughout her life, it looked almost impossible to live for herself. That's when someone knocked her window pane. She was thinking it all over and over again when the last couple of days' sleep finally took over her and she dozed off in her car, waiting. That's when she heard the sound. "Wake up, ma'am, it's your turn now." It was a guy who worked at the gas station. She looked at her cell phone and she hardly closed her eyes for 4 minutes and this happened. So she did tell them to put gas in the car. Meanwhile, the man filled the car's tank. She got out of the car with her wallet waiting to make a payment. When the man was done, he brought his card machine and the lady opened her wallet and it slipped and all her cards fell on the floor. She apologized and asked for a moment. The man helped her in picking it up, but the worst was yet to be discovered. And something happened that she didn't move out of the place even after her car's tank was full. It was a weird issue that the lady was facing while everyone else kept waiting. The people behind her in the queue kept waiting. While everyone was wondering what was going on, a man in the queue grew frustrated. He wanted to know what was happening and why it was taking so long. After all, everyone has to go somewhere, and nobody had that much time to wait at the gas station. There were 4 friends in that car. While the one sitting at the driver's seat was ready to check on what was taking so long, his friend sitting next to him told him to calm down. He asked him to be patient and see, but when the car in front of them didn't move for more than 5 minutes, he couldn't stop his friend any further. The man got out of his car to check on the first car in the queue that wasn't moving for quite a while now. When he returned, his face was numb, without any expressions, and none of his friends understood what was making him feel this terrible. Carlos Davis was the guy sitting on the front seat next to his friend, who just got in the car and seemed anxious. Carlos is an aspiring comedian who always wanted to bring a smile on people's faces. He worked hard to become a famous stand-up comedian. Obviously, he couldn't see his friend sad, so he tried to know the whole thing. Carlos, who struggled for years to become a comedian, knew the value of hard work and always appreciated people around him. He is the kind of man who brings positive vibes with him wherever he goes. So, when his friend told him what he had just seen, Carlos knew exactly what he should be doing in that situation. Finally, Carlos' friend told him what was going on near the car and the young comic knew that he has to take action. His friend told him about the woman who was standing at the gas station next to her car. Carlos was surprised to know about the scenario. The woman actually forgot to bring her credit card and her other cards were already overdrawn. Seeing this, the embarrassed woman ran back to her car to grab all the pennies she had left in the front drawer. She was counting all the pennies and was still running short on money. When Carlos's friend noticed this, he felt bad for the woman, but how Carlos reacted, it was the incredible thing of the day. This made Carlos think of his own days of struggle. Carlos wasn't irritated or frustrated that he will have to wait. Rather, he asked his friend to do him a favor. He had a conversation with all of the 3 of his friends sitting in the car. One of the friends took out his cell phone and turned on the video. There, he was planning on doing something that was worth recording. The woman was disheartened. Carlos didn't know how this little act would be changing the woman's life forever. Carlos Davis told his friend to call the woman. What he was planning on doing was quite unique. The woman came near to Carlos and seemed afraid. There was something about this lady that touched Carlos's heart. Wondering what it was? Her eyes were swollen. Anyone could tell it just by looking at her face that either she hadn't slept for days or she had cried for days. Just to make the woman feel comfortable, Carlos went closer to her. The woman was now scared a little. She was hesitating and talking to a bunch of men. She really couldn't understand the reason why they were filming her. What was it that they were looking for? Were they angry with her just because they had to wait too long because of her? When the woman looked at Carlos's hand, her eyes filled with tears and she couldn't stop crying. Carlos was one person who stood out of the crowd, and so were his thoughts. He wanted to do something for this woman, so he did this. She looked up at Carlos and he said, this is for you." The woman didn't know why anyone would do it for a stranger. The woman was feeling blessed to be there at that moment. How suddenly things can change. A moment ago, she was facing an awkward situation, and now she was standing there with one of the most kind-hearted people she ever met. Carlos handed over a bunch of $100 bills to the woman. Carlos was doing what he thought was right, but little did he know how impactful it will be for the woman. After all, the smallest of things matter the most, right? The woman told them that no one thinks for anyone else, and after the 4 guys came for her help, she felt like telling them what brought her into this terrible situation. Knowing her story made this group of friends so emotional that they too couldn't hold back their tears. It was a heart-wrenching moment that she told them about her husband. Carlos assured the woman that he was there for her. The woman didn't realize till that moment that she was in need of listening to those words, but when he said it, made her feel more than 1,000 times better. Losing a loved one is a horrible experience. The guys were able to understand her pain, and that's the kind of emotional support she needed that she couldn't get from her children. And to make it worse was the money problems. Carlos and her friends' efforts made the mourning woman smile a little. They made her day, gave her the type of hope she was looking for. But there's much more left to the story, as people had different views about Carlos's actions. When this video was later uploaded on the internet, it went viral in no time. While most of the people praised Carlos for his actions and good intentions, some criticized him of doing this just for fame. And there's something in this video that shows that it wasn't done for fame. It was the boys who were actually crying in the video. Carlos conducts a weekly event named I Love You. He goes to people in need, helps them, and puts the video on Twitter to motivate more and more people. In the rapidly moving world, he likes to do his little contribution. Also, the man got his big break recently. Carlos is not just a smart guy, but also a hard worker that's a lethal combo, we must tell you. His Instagram and YouTube followers skyrocketed. On the road of being a professional, he was noticed by Chance the Rapper. Chance the Rapper, who is a talented and prominent performer in the US, offered Carlos a work to do a couple of intros for his latest albums. As soon as things started to take off for the young comic, he increased his contribution to society.